Thank you very much. Thanks. Morning, everyone. Veronique, Professor Tabiseng, and ladies and gentlemen, really quite an honor for you and women to be here. And congratulations to Switzerland. I think when we were in Geneva in May, you were still campaigning. So really good to hear that you have a seat on the Security Council. So I'm not going to belabor. I'll just add on to some of the stats. I think when I was asking what exactly you want me to speak about, I got quite a lot of questions. So I only picked two. So I will just briefly indicate why, just one or 2 points on why women are not found at the table in mediation, and also some of the solutions, and give a very impressive case study of what women can do to actually make sure that they create space for themselves. So if we're looking at the stats, in the 27 years from between 1992 and 2019, women constituted in average 13%, just 13% of negotiators, 6% of mediators, and 6% of signatories in major peace processes around the world. And that's a very small number considering all the issues that have been happening since 1992. Peace efforts in 2020 faced similar challenges. 10% of negotiators in the Afghan talks in 2020, and 20% of negotiators in Libya's political discussions were women, and none were actually involved in the military talks. Because when they start talking about the military, it's supposed to be, heavy-handed, no women. And I think if I just share something, I was at a recent conference a few months ago, and we were talking about the conflict in Mozambique. And we were asking why women were not at the forefront in Cabo Delgado, in the peacekeepers. And an official from one of the governments said, no, we don't put women at the forefront because it's not safe, peacekeepers, but these are soldiers. So already that mentality and that perception to them already, despite the WPS agenda, despite everything we put, the perception of the people that hold those offices and decide is still that women cannot be in this space because it's too dangerous, even though they're soldiers. And then and recently, in the takeover of the Afghanistan by the Taliban, Afghan women were not included among the negotiators in 2020. And when the delegates representing the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan met in Moscow in March last year, there was only one woman and all men. And obviously, if there is one woman on that panel, she's not going to be saying quite a lot. And this also translates to the Security Council, and I'm glad that Switzerland will be there to at least be a voice and represent everybody else. I think if everybody knows, the WPS agenda consists of 10 resolutions. 1325 was the first one in 2000, but there have been resolutions every other year. The last two resolutions, 2467 and 2493, were especially difficult. And 2467, you even had 2 countries that abstained from voting, and that was Russia and China, that wouldn't even vote on the Security Council. And this is where these strategies are discussed and a way forward is put. So if you're having countries at the Security Council actually not even voting and refusing, that also creates problems for everybody else. So I think in terms of women not participating, one of the things, there was a meeting in Italy, women peace mediators and peacekeepers met sometime last year. One of the big things that came out was women's role in peace processes is just but a formality. A lot of them were saying they find their role as a formality and that women are better suited to observer roles. They are put on observer roles, and at most they are included in negotiations only to address women's issues as indicated earlier. So they're only coming to talk about women's issues and nothing else. Disarmament, you can't have women speaking about disarmament. And then also that women peace builders often lamented that their inclusion in peace processes is seen as a delaying factor rather than a positive element for the urgent and successful resolution of conflicts. So I think one of the big things in terms of moving forward, the UN has been trying to work with countries. The Secretary General has been pushing whenever the UN is supporting, whether it's mediators, to have the gender parity in the number of mediators, the number of negotiators that are at the table. But oftentimes, even as the UN does that and puts that forward, the parties involved in the conflict, like Russia now, there will be no woman at the table. So it will still come back to that. You have the UN will push as much as it can. And I think this is probably one of the roles of development partners, because they often support these peace talks, that at least they put that caveat that if peace talks are going to go ahead, there have to be women at least at the table. And I think just to conclude, I'll just tell you one case study that has been really an inspiration, I think, for maybe a lot of civil society, and not even civil society, a lot of women. In the early 2000s, I think if you all know, Liberia, all pictures we saw of Liberia were, child soldiers and sad stories and the war. But then the women in Liberia, mothers, grandmothers, sisters, they stepped forward and they formed the Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace campaign. I think you've heard about the women that wore white. And they went to the market and they told their husbands that if you don't stop this, there will be nothing at home. So it was kind of like wearing all white clothing. The women of Liberia's capital, Monrovia, gathered at the fish market, and the images were seen around the world. And what they were saying is there will be no physical intimacy until you stop. And they were following, and they did this for months. They were following then President Charles Taylor. They blockaded all the entrances to the peace talks in Ghana to make sure that they were heard. And eventually they were heard. They gave them an ear. They listened to them. And I think as a result, we do know we had the first female president in Africa, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, a few years, I think 2005, 2006. So I think that's a testament to what women can do. And I think every time I'm in meetings, I always argue either with the SADC counterparts or with AU that, every time there's this perception that you have to create spaces for women. We have to create this, but, women do have their agency, do have the power within them to actually take it into their hands and move forward and actually push for what they need. So thank you so much. And I think this is the message I will leave. Thank you very much. I look forward to it.